Hello and welcome to Cape Ann ARTWaves 2022. ARTWaves is a member program of 1623 Studios here in Gloucester, Massachusetts. We kicked off this program in March of 2020. ARTWaves delves into the working lives of our local arts community here on Cape Ann. My name is Jacqueline Danham DeFalco, and I'm co-host and co-producer of this show, along with my fellow artist colleague, Christine Fisher. We're very excited to announce that ARTWaves has received over 12,000 views on YouTube since we began, and we've interviewed nearly 60 artists. Cape Ann ARTWaves is made possible by our generous sponsors, Prince Insurance Agency and Christine Fisher, visual artist, Compass Realty and Martha Anger, real estate advisor, Protective Packaging, Inc., and today we add Cape Ann Savings Bank to that list, and the Common Crow Natural Market. We'd also like to recognize Steve Lacey and Pat Verga, who have provided us with original music for the show, and acknowledge our partners, Sea Arts and 1623 Studios. Without them, the show would not go on. So thank you so much for watching today. Today we have a special guest, Judy Robinson-Cox. Judy, say hello to everybody.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm honored.
Well, we're excited. Judy is a face that you would see everywhere here in the arts community in Cape Ann. So let me tell you a little bit about Judy that maybe you don't know. So Judy holds a BFA from the University of Connecticut. She's also studied at the Philadelphia College of Art, Montserrat, the Griffin Museum Photography Atelier program. That's just the beginning. Judy is trained in photography, painting, graphic design. Judy's been involved in the arts for most of her life as a fine arts craft person, abstract painter, graphic designer, and photographer. In 2004, she carried her love of macro photography to another level by adding tiny 3/4 inch high miniature figures to the subject matter. Working with reflected light and color, Judy creates humorous vignettes that speak about the human condition. She makes assemblages and mixed media pieces in a similar vein, inviting the viewer to enter these lighthearted microcosms. I think we all know Judy for that. And my goal today is to expand your vision about Judy way beyond that. Judy is represented by Square Circle Gallery in Rockport. Judy's work is in the permanent collection of the Culinary Arts Museum at Johnson & Wales University and many private collections in the United States, including mine, and in Europe. She's active in various Massachusetts arts organizations, including Rocky Neck Art Colony, Newburyport Art Association, Rockport Art Association, Cambridge Art Associations. But I also have to tell you, she is an uber volunteer. I don't think either Sea Arts or Rocky Neck would be here today without the help that Judy's provided. I'm not going to read the 2-page long list of the awards that Judy has achieved over time, but you know that they're there, and she's really always very active in the arts community and also helping Gallery 53 on Rocky Neck, which wouldn't exist without her. I have to show off a little bit because I have my own Judy. This is a pillow made out of one of her famous Scrabble games that was custom made for me. And then I have this lovely photograph of the, of course, paint factory on Rocky Neck here in my Judy collection. And always a huge fan of her as both a person and an artist. So welcome, Judy, again to the show. Okay.
Thank you.
So we're going to kick off. Judy has, I have to tell the audience, Judy has such a fascinating personal background. So I want to talk about her journey. I want her to talk about her journey. It's anything but a straight line. The only common thread is her incredible creativity and curiosity, which has carried her through her entire life from her childhood.
I come from a family with 2 overachieving parents. My mother was grew up with blonde hair and blue eyes, grew up in a small town in Oklahoma, and all she liked to do was sew, knit, crochet, anything you can think of that you could make out of fabric or cloth. My mother was always busy. And they moved several times, and within a week she had made curtains for every single room in the house. So that's kind of mother I had. And my father worked his way. My father is Chinese American, born in this country, but when he first couldn't speak any English, he was only Chinese in his family. He learned English and he decided not to have any kind of accent. And he excelled in school, got a full scholarship to Columbia, and became a successful businessman. So I had those two to live up to. And I think that's where I inherited my productivity and drive.
And I think somewhere in there was, you moved around a lot, I understand. Is that correct? And
Yes.
with you always went certain tools that maybe gave you some foundation for where you are today in the world of photography.
Well, my father was an avid photographer himself and built a darkroom in our house. So when we moved, the darkroom came with us. And that's how I first learned how to process film and, develop my own pictures. So photography for me, ever since high school, was important in my life. And I also love to draw, and I didn't know about collage, but
yeah,
when I
well,
was
that all came later, I guess.
Yeah.
So when I look at your education, it's actually a wonderful way to sort of show how your artistic influences built over time. And you really had a lot of different parts to your education, which also makes it interesting, maybe partially because you were moving around, but partially just because your interests changed. You mentioned that you started out at Lake Erie College for Women, which I've never even heard of. Does it even exist today?
I have no idea. Lake Erie College for Women was a school of 500 girls, small private school, and everyone went to Europe their junior year. So that's why I applied there. But the girls also were like sorority girls who went there because you could board your own horse.
Oh, so, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, those weren't my kind of girl. So I transferred to NYU, and that was much better for me.
Okay. And that's where, of course, New York is where a lot of art. Now, where were you living at the time? Where did you grow up, Judy?
I grew up my father, as I said, my father was always trying to get better jobs. So we moved a lot, but I grew up mostly in New Jersey.
Okay.
And Buffalo, New York is where I lived near there, where I went to high school.
Oh, right. Okay. We have that in common. All
That's
right.
right. Yeah.
So, but just going back to NYU, of course, you were immersed in the New York City arts culture. And you have mentioned to me what you call the grunge abstract street art as kind of a jumping off point for your influences. So what was that at the time?
Well,
tell me a little bit more about that.
To me meant, with my camera, which was all black and white, I always said I used my camera to find abstract art. So by looking through the lens and finding just pieces of, detritus or scratches or peeled paint or things like that. And when it said to me, this is a painting, or this is a photograph, I took the picture. And that's how I started with photography.
And so I'm going to flash these photos up of, I believe, Janis Joplin. Is there a story there?
Oh, well, yes, Janis. Well, first of all, I was experimenting. I was shooting for 1 year. I shot all my work with high contrast copy film, which is like what you use to, I don't even know if they make it anymore. It's only black and white. It doesn't have any gray. But I thought that was really cool at the time. But I had that in my film, and I was at the Newport Jazz Festival, and Janis Joplin was on stage. So I just kind of snuck into the press box right in front of the stage, and nobody noticed me because I'm so short. And then I got to take some really good, what I thought were good pictures of her at the time.
I think there's some value to this photo, Judy. You should hold on to that one. right?
Well, maybe.
But that's great. And of course, that was just the beginning. And then you moved into some other aspects, some other things where you started to experiment a little bit further in your photography when you switched over to the University of Connecticut. So maybe we should talk about that. You mentioned silk screen, painted background, transparent film layers. Maybe you could talk us through those.
So I actually, in my photography class, decided to, I didn't really, then I decided I didn't like straight photography anymore. And I was trying to combine it with painting. So I learned how to do photographic silk screen on my own. I didn't have any class or anything, and made a few high contrast. You have to start with high contrast images to make the plate, and then you can silk screen it. But then just in the process of doing that, I found these high contrast images I was making, which were on film and were transparent. I could use those instead and paint either the back of them. If I painted the back of them and then having the black layer on top, it gave me a painterly look to a photograph. Or others, I just painted the picture itself. But anyway, I tried a lot of stuff like that.
And the result would be this interesting geometric photo that I'm looking at that has the green and the yellow. And,
so that was like a wheelbase of a bus. So
I see that now.
You see the little rivets, and then I just painted it, so it became I guess like a painting instead.
Interesting. Okay. Well, you know, I always learn something new when I meet people in these interviews. And so I have to say that you had mentioned the next series of influences on you were some amazing photographers. First, Aaron Siskind, and then also Jerry Olsman and Paul Caponagro. Obviously, these are not folks I would have known. And so I went and looked at their work, and I have to say I was really blown away. So let's start with Aaron Siskind and have you discuss, I think you're going to go side by side, one of their photos and your photos that were as a result of that influence.
So Aaron, I think I discovered when I went to NYU. He at that time, I don't know exactly when he was taking the pictures, but he was doing the street photography like I was. I think I saw his and was influenced, but I think I started to do it first and then discovered him. And although, I really can't remember which one came first. Now, Paul and Jerry both came to UConn when I was there and gave lectures, and that's how I learned about them. Paul Caponagro, I guess is how you pronounce his name, was kind of a very spiritual photographer, and he captured emotion from the kind of photographs he took, and mostly everything in nature. He kind of captured the spirit of nature, and they were very moving photographs.
And I am going to be showing the incredible trees. That's one of the photos that you sent, and then how that influenced your own photography along those lines.
Yeah.
Really exquisite, really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then Jerry, that's he's very different, right?
Jerry, what was really interesting about him is he came before, how people now can manipulate everything in Photoshop. Well, he was before Photoshop, and he manipulated his photographs in the darkroom. So he could spend a couple of days making a print. Like, I think the one I showed you as an example, he had a tree growing out of a house. So to get this image, he would dodge and burn and have multiple negatives, and until he finally came up with the final image that he wanted. And he's still out there today. I think both Paul and Jerry are still working today.
I think Paul's up in Maine. I think that's
and his son John Paul Caponagro is
Mhm.
kind of taking over in his father's
Yeah.
footsteps.
But it's great to see, how these folks really influenced you. But then you kind of diverted a little bit at this point, and started to pick up some other art forms as your life went in some new directions. So I know you picked up mixed media, collage, and painting, and leather work. So why don't you talk a little, let's go to leather just for fun, because I think that was a phase of
Yeah.
your life that not a
Well,
lot of people maybe know about.
and it isn't something I planned to do, but it was very impulsive as a child. I mean, I'm not as impulsive as I used to be, but one day I was walking through the student union in Yukon, and I saw this display on a table of these beautiful carved belts, not like stamped like you think of when you think of leather belts, but they were hand carved with, beautiful forms. And I wanted to meet the artists that did this. And we just sort of fell in love. And like in about 3 days, I had packed everything in the back of my station wagon and drove off to Woodstock, New York with this guy who turned out to be not so good, but at the time, that's what we started our own leathercraft business called Land of Zebu. This is how I learned how to do craft shows, which I am doing again with Little People Pictures.
That's great. And so how long did you pursue that?
7 years.
Wow.
I kind of have 7-year periods in my life. And then I decided this wasn't for me, and I left, and I went to Philadelphia, where my parents lived outside there. My brother lived there. So I went and stayed with my brother for a while, and then got this job. First, I got a job at a technical illustrator illustrating computers, which I didn't, that was far from what I was doing.
Right.
And then I got a company hired me because I had illustrated their computer to come work in-house as a graphic designer. And I learned on the job. I didn't know how to do anything in graphic design.
Wow. Wow. So that's where you picked up your graphic design skills.
Yeah. And
Really?
I took night courses at Philadelphia College of Art to teach me a few things.
Okay, great.
That was
and many of us have also experienced directly your work as a graphic designer here in Cape Ann, and I know you've used that in to help a lot of the nonprofits. So, so thank you for that, Judy, and for adding that other skill set into your minis that you have, right? So let's. Do you want to say anything else about that crazy phase of your life that you call it the hippie phase? Is there any other fun facts you want to share with us about that time?
Well, I went to Woodstock. Well, I already talked about that. I don't think so.
No, not for public television. I have to mention here, and I did not mention in your bio, but I have this fabulous photograph of you and Tom Robinson-Cox, your phenomenal husband of nearly 36 years. So I'm going to show that because it's not that it's just the happy couple, right? It's also that there was a graphic design element to this that I think we just have to talk about.
Okay, so I met Tom when I lived in Philadelphia on the beach in Long Beach Island, or in Long Beach Island. I was on vacation, and we fell in love. And then he kept wanting me to come up to Boston, and I finally said yes, and that's our wedding invitation. And in the meantime, I had gotten another job at a different computerized typesetting company called Zyvision, and the computerized typesetting system could do this invitation. Well, I had to program it, but it could type his name into his face and my name into my face. So,
and that was like the bleeding edge technology of the time, 36 years ago, right? Okay, so that's why we have to show it, because it's really that it's hard to believe what we can actually do today, right?
Yeah.
And all the incredible manipulations, which actually leads me to a question before we go on to the rest of your work. I really want to talk about this because as a kind of purist in the world of photography, somebody that's tracked it for your entire career, I'd really like to get your thoughts and your opinion about what is fine art photography today? Because obviously every one of us thinks we can just pick up our iPhone and do great stuff.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say that fine art photography is photography is using a camera to capture something that you see. If it's called fine art photography, it goes beyond just capturing a thing, and it is a piece of art in itself. The thing doesn't matter. The thing is just a way to get to the image that you want, that you can see in your mind or that you can feel. And it has to have more than just record what's in front of you. It has to capture a feeling or, some kind of emotion. One thing, when I took a philosophy course called aesthetics, they talked about the aesthetic experience. And to me, I try to make a photograph that when you look at, I feel an aesthetic experience. I don't know how to describe what that feels like, but I know when I first felt it, I went into a gallery that was surrounded by by an abstract painter's big black and white graphic work. And I just felt this rush, like a buzz. And when you see something that captures that, that's a really good piece of art to me. That's how I value things.
That's a great thought. And
yeah.
I guess the instrument you use to get there will probably change, but in the end, that was what distinguishes, like you said, just a photo from a piece of
and even a
artwork.
painting that's just a copy of a thing by itself, to me, isn't enough. And it needs to capture the feeling as well as and it doesn't even have to look like a thing. You really want to capture the feeling.
Well, I definitely think you've done that in your work, Judy. And some of your feelings are very serious and some of yours are very humorous. A lot that we know is very humorous. And you just make people very happy with your work, but you also touch off a lot of emotions with your work. So I think it's a good chance to show some of these pieces. So for example, Abandon, I think, is a good one to show here. I think that really captures an emotion. Is there anything particularly you'd like to comment on with that?
The Abandon is from a series I took of hurricane damage in the Bahamas. And it was moving to see all of these abandoned houses that people had to leave. And in the Bahamas, the government doesn't help people when their house is damaged. The people have to pay for it themselves to fix it. And if they don't have the money, they have to leave.
I think behind you, I just want to point out the Atelier is a really exquisite photograph that definitely evokes a very calm emotion. I don't know, you must have had picked that one specifically for the interview today, because it's really tranquil. It's really beautiful. But that's another great example of your work. I think you have also something very interesting in this photograph you took of graffiti. I want to show that because it's just so different. It's so edgy. Do you want to make a comment on that in terms of, sort of where you were going with that?
It was one of those pictures that, like I said, looking for the art through my camera lens, I just saw that and I took it. It's just a phone booth that has graffiti on it, but together the composition just
it really speaks something there. Exactly. In fact, it really looks like it actually looks like Chinese writing to me, when I look at it. It
does have that feel, right?
Yeah, it definitely has that feeling. I'm going to switch it up a little bit because you have gone so far beyond photography, just taking a photo. You've gone into, of course, you have many other art forms like assemblages that you do, but you're also, really mixing it up with the painting and the photography together. And so let's kind of take a look at some of the other work that you are doing right now.
I did a lot of photographs of the sides of boats that are hauled out because they made landscape. You could get an abstract landscape with clouds, all from the paint that was cracking off the side of the boat. So that's a place I go a lot of times to take pictures. And that might be the one you're thinking of. I'm not quite sure.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to mixed media then, because I do have some great examples of that. We have fish out of water as one of those paintings. And then we also have another one that's called Fish Town. So let's show those and talk to me about what's the technique behind the mixed media.
Well, it varies, but it's really combining painting and collage. So Fish Out of Water has a lot of collage underneath, and then it's painted over. And then I just added that little collaged fish at the top. And the Fish Town, it was more of a painting and drawing that I then added a few little collage elements too, but it started out as a drawing and painting.
Okay.
Yes.
And then you have straight collage as well that you're doing. And so it seems that that's your, from what you told me, that is the direction kind of that you're in right at the moment.
That's what I'm doing right now. And I don't know if I'll be doing it.
Yes. Well, we know you change things up all the time, right?
Yeah.
We know you change things up. All right. Well, I think, part of the goal today was really to show the variety of work that you have done. Now, the one thing we haven't really talked about at all, and it's the thing that you're probably the most well known for around here, is your little people. I want you to explain this whole concept of little people to everybody. What's behind it? The whole term Lilliputian, which I really hadn't really ever heard before. We'll show a few of those while you're talking. The flowers, the peony gardeners, and a few of the others. I think you have to really give us some more background on that so we can appreciate this.
The reason I started doing this to begin with is that I wanted to make photographs that didn't have any Photoshop manipulation in them, but were kind of surreal in a way that combined, like, for example, broccoli as a tree with little people walking under it. And that, so I found out you could get these tiny train people and model train people. And I got some of them and I started doing that. And so then I built a little studio, and there's a lot of lighting. You have to worry about lighting and focus and things like that go into taking each picture, which and sometimes I use flashlights for shadows and all kinds of things like that. But they're fun to do. And I kind of can put in like little social commentary in them without saying anything. Or and mostly I just make them because people like them and they makes them happy. And I like
it really does. They are so much fun, Judy. And sometimes I look at them and go, what was she thinking? But then it always, it just always makes you smile. And it's given you a wonderful launching pad for so many different venues and, ways of selling. So so that's fantastic. And I think, we are, there's just so much about your work. I hope that we really can direct people to look at your website, which of course, all of your online properties are fabulous because of your incredible graphic design background. And my last question to you today, really, because you have, you've done so many different things in the community. You've looked at art from so many different perspectives. You've been successful at running galleries and selling. Do you have any words of wisdom for your fellow artists in the community on the commercial side or any other side of art making?
Well, I think you want to get your face in front of people and do things so they'll notice you. So I would encourage everyone to enter as many shows as you can. I really want to give a big thank you to a few people that really got me started in the arts here in Cape Ann. And one is Lara LaBianca, who gave a little seminar on how to become an artist. Because Tom and I moved here, you know, we each were doing photographs. We didn't know how to get it out there. And she gave us step by step. You got to do this. You have to, you know, enter shows and do work that's good enough to get accepted. So she was a really big help and influence to me. And also to Joanne Castano, who roped me into joining Sea Arts. And I was, that was a really big help to me. It really connected me with people, and things like that are so important. And you really have to volunteer, go out there and get to know other people in the field that you're trying to be part of. So that's my advice to anyone who wants to.
That's great. That's just super advice, Judy. And of course, it sounds like this next phase for you is going to actually be a little bit different, maybe slightly more inward looking. Is that correct?
I think that's right. I think it's time for me. I'm stepping back. I'm not going to, well, we don't even know if Gallery 53 is going to be a gallery or not. And so many things are changing. So I decided it was time for me to take a sabbatical from Rocky Neck and to work, just concentrate on my own work and see where it goes.
Well, that's great. And so, but in the meantime, we still can buy plenty of your work. So we will flash up on the screen all the various ways to find you. Any, your Facebook page, your website, any preferred way of being contacted by your fan club out there?
I probably email.
Yeah.
If you want to get in touch with me, is still the best. Yeah.
Great. Well, we'll do that. Judy, thank you so much. And on behalf of the arts community on Cape Ann, particularly the groups that I've been involved with, Sea Arts and Rocky Neck, thank you for all your good energy over the years. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you today. So we're wrapping up this episode of Cape Ann ARTWaves with Judy Robinson-Cox. You can view Cape Ann ARTWaves on the 1623 Studios YouTube channel, on channel 12, on Facebook and Twitter, and it will be featured in the Sea Arts e-blast. And we hope that you'll sign up so that you'll be among the first to hear our interviews with artists every other week. And next week, you'll hear from Christine Fisher. Thank you once again to all of our fabulous sponsors and to Judy for a great segment here on Cape Ann ARTWaves.
Thank you.